Hi guys, hopefully we are recording. Okay, so today is a presentation on the Delphi dates of occurrence, or the date that the date or dates that girls were believed to have been murdered. And so we're going to be going over the first half of this presentation on the relevant observances. So this is part 1. So the goal of today's presentation is to introduce some information and terminology of the case, present some basic demographics, and a set foundation linking the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German to connections with the non-secular, religious, or spiritual observance that had historical ties to human sacrifice. These Delphi presentations are also meant to disseminate information in an attempt to aid the defense attorneys of Richard Allen, as they have been severely hampered by their limited and further denied court funding. If you know anyone who may benefit from this information, please send it forward to the relevant parties, and do not hesitate to give them my email, enlightenthedark@gmail.com. So, quick disclaimer, the theories presented in this presentation are by no means set in stone, and cannot be definitively proven without apprehending and then extracting information from the perpetrator or perpetrators of this crime. The point is to show that the connection exists between the date or dates of the murders and historically documented pagan sacrifice. It's up to the viewer or listener to develop their own opinions and thoughts on whether or not they find this information compelling and or relevant to the murders of Abby and Libby. So due to the nature of the subject matter, sad, even disturbing information will be discussed, which is altogether unavoidable. And as of today, Sunday the 21st of April, 2024, Part 2 will be released sometime this upcoming week and will contain information specifically addressing pagan observances. And I encourage both parts be watched in their sequential order, as it will make for a more complete, comprehensive picture. Okay, so the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German occurred between Monday the 13th and Tuesday the 14th of February 2017. So Monday the 13th of February was a day off school in Delphi, Indiana. So just for a quick explanation, some school districts account for extreme weather and factor them into the school calendar. These days are referred to as snow days in the Midwest. And snow days are especially important in rural or poorly funded counties where resources to adequately and safely clear roads are lacking or absent. And or snow days can sometimes be used when the school district has like a certain teacher employment contract, which guarantees a certain amount of paid days or collective bargaining agreement that may be in place requiring a set amount of days off for working teachers. And whatever the case, there are times when snow days go unused, and due to already existing contractual agreements, those days must be, for lack of a better term, used up. And this was likely the situation regarding Monday the 13th of February, because it was, by all accounts, a beautiful sunny day. So Abby Williams and Libby German were dropped off at the Monon High Bridge Trail in Delphi, Indiana on the 13th between 1:30 and 1:50 p.m. I'm kind of leaving a broad time frame open for that period because there are conflicting reports when they were actually dropped off. So I just want to leave that 20-minute window open. And they were dropped off by Libby's older sister, Kelsey German. Okay, so just to go over some very basic terminology here. In law enforcement investigations, the date of occurrence is the specific date when an incident, crime, or event occurred. So the date of occurrence is significant because it's a crucial piece of information used in investigations, legal proceedings, and record keeping. Determining the date of occurrence accurately helps law enforcement agencies establish timelines, gather evidence, and ultimately build a case against perpetrators. So, just to kind of briefly distinguish between the date of occurrence and timeline, while the date of occurrence is the fixed date which the primary event, incident, or crime occurred, the timeline is a chronological sequence of events related to an incident and starting before the occurrence and extending through its aftermath. So timelines include various actions, movements, and occurrences which may consist of visited locations, times, and place of discovered evidence, the notification of emergency services, and or the employment of investigatory measures. So timelines are useful for understanding and perceiving the sequence of events, identifying witnesses or suspects, and establishing connections between assorted collected evidence. So the reason that I've decided to look into observances that are spiritual in nature, specific to the dates of occurrence or the dates of death, which are the 13th and 14th, so we assume, is because of, I'm calling them the 4 leads. So first we have former Carroll County Prosecutor Robert Ives remarking in an interview that multiple signatures existed. He said at least 3, which appeared to be non-secular in nature. Secondly, we have the Franks Memorandum, which was written by Richard Allen's defense team, and they were citing an official law enforcement investigative report concerning the actions of individuals in nearby communities and in Delphi who were known practitioners of the Pagan Asatru. And Asatru, of course, is a modern Norse pagan practice. So third, the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit determined that the individual or individuals responsible for the homicides had ties to or knowledge of Nordic beliefs. And then fourth, comments made by Purdue Professor of Germanic Studies, Jeffrey Turco, with the backing of a Harvard University colleague. Both strongly believed that the crime scene was, without a doubt, quote, someone trying to replicate Germanic runic script, end quote. So the significance of the dates of death, and we are presuming them to be the 13th and 14th, those dates has a potential symbolic meaning, and the dates of death and the dates of occurrence, they're also a reasonable starting point for better understanding a plausible timeline, which then lends clue to the basic means, motive, and opportunity of the crime. So briefly, let's go into, these are the certificates of death. I do not think have been updated, but the dates and times of injury are inconsistent with Abby Williams' date of death. And other discrepancies are found in the manners of death for both Abby and Libby. So the publicly released certificates of death for Abby and Libby are unreliable, and there may exist more accurate, yet to be released death certificates that have been made with revisions, but they weren't available at the time that I'm making this presentation. So I just want to note there are some inconsistencies and inaccuracies, and that includes, it's really hard to see here, but the time of death and the date of death and the manner of death and the date of injury and the time of injury. So Abby's certificate of death lists her date and time of injury occurring on the 13th of February around 4 p.m. Yet her date and time of death is recorded as the 14th of February at 2:15 p.m. So Libby's date and time of injury occurred also on the 13th around 4 p.m., like Abby's. But Libby's date and time of death is listed as the 13th at 12:15 p.m. Now, these are probably typos. They could just be typos. Or the time and date of death that we have here listed for the girls could signify the time and date the victims were recovered by the volunteer searchers, and then, law enforcement's brought in and the coroner or whoever it is recorded them as deceased. So that could be what this is showing us, the time of death and the date of death. But in which case, Libby's date of death is still a typo because it's the 13th, okay? Because Abby's is the 14th, and they were presumably killed at the same time on the same day. So this is recovery. Even if this means recovery, it's still a typo. However, both Abby and Libby's certificates of death list their manners of death as suicide instead of homicide, which is just very bizarre. And of course, maybe somebody was rushing to get these put out or made available to the families, but they're released at different times. Like, it's hard to see, but I think this is like sometime in late May May 26, 2017 for Abby that it's released, okay? The date's certified, I should say. And then July 19th, 2017 is the date certified for Libby. So it doesn't really, it doesn't really make sense as far as like the copying and pasting theory. So whatever the case, these are not reliable. But the reason that I mention the inconsistencies of the dates of death is because it explains my decision to research like all sorts of observances, holidays, festivities, observances for both the 13th and 14th of February, because it's so unknown when they were actually killed. The autopsies would probably do a good job of showing that, but of course we don't have access to that. So very briefly, I do want to go over some cultural heritage and demographics of Carroll County, Indiana, just to kind of show how I narrowed in on the stuff that I decided to look at. But so a very brief history of Carroll County is like there's the first European settlers of Carroll County were Henry Robinson and his son. They settled down in the winter of 1824 to 1825. And in 1828, the General Assembly of Indiana, which was established in 1816, structured and organized the county of Carroll, and then appointed a commissioner selected the site of Carrollton for the county seat, but shortly thereafter renamed the city to Delphi. So in August of 1828, there were a bunch of land lots that went up for sale. But the land that did sell, it sold for a very low price. So further sales were halted to await an increase in profitability. And then by autumn, there were a large number of new settlers that had arrived, and a Presbyterian congregation was established. And then I found a list of, in 1855, there was this first meeting of the Old Settlers Society of Carroll County, and they then compiled a list of names of its earliest settlers from 1824 to 1831, and of the 27 listed surnames, 14 had English or Welsh ancestry, 5 Irish, 4 Scottish, and 4 German. And I got this information from genealogytrails.com. So quickly, I always like to kind of include as far back as I can go in history, but it unfortunately, with what was done to the native peoples, we don't know completely a lot of the history. But before Carroll County was a county, it had many native peoples living in and around the area, and so the Waya people lived predominantly in this area, but there was also intermixing with other groups such as like the Miami and the Delaware in green here, Kickapoo, there's Kickapoo, the pink, and Wyandotte, which I hope I'm saying that correctly. So today, Native peoples account for only 0.29% of the population, and I think that's for Indiana. I'll have to go back and look. But some very general demographics of Carroll County as of 2022 include, oh dear, hold on guys, sorry. Okay. Okay, so of the 20,555 residents, 96.7% were white. So 90% of residents are white in Carroll County. As far as ancestry goes, about 18% had German ancestry, 10% English, 10% Irish, 2.1% Scottish, 1.4% Italian, 1.2% French, 0.8% Polish, and 0.3% Norwegian. And then the median age of Carroll County is about 43 years old. But if you compare that to the rest of Indiana, the median age for Indianans is 38.2 years old. The residents of Carroll County that are 65 and older are around 20% versus about 17% in Indiana. And then residents that are 65 to 75 or 74 years old are about 12%. And residents that are 75 to 84 years old are about 6%. And then residents that are 85 years and older are about 2.3%. And I got all of this information from the U.S. Census. So, man, sorry guys. Okay, jeez. So, I also found these stats from Nielsberg.com, and it includes information from 2018 to 2022. So, roughly, well, it says 10,389 residents were male to the 10,008 residents that were female. So it was about a 51% percentage of males to about 49% percentage of females. So it was close to 104 males to 100 women. But in comparison to the rest of the U.S., you could say that 49.5 roughly are male, 49.5% are male to almost 51% being female. So it's kind of reversed here. And it's a little more heavily reversed, skewed male in comparison to the rest of the U.S. So, and I also found these stats interesting. So of all the residents that were veterans living in Carroll County, they made up about 8.3% of the population compared to Indiana's 6.2%. And then poverty was actually lower in Carroll County. It was at 7.3% compared to the rest of Indiana, which was about 12.6%. So, and I also got that from the U.S. Census data. So, of course, the area is predominantly white. It has mostly European ancestry. And so, therefore, like when I was researching this, it made sense for me to begin looking into observances or customs of European origin, and then applying that and focusing on the time period of mid-February. So quickly, let's just go over observance versus ritual. Observances refer to the broader act of commemorating or marking specific days, events, or occasions with religious or cultural significance. And while observances do encompass a broader range of religious or cultural practices, including rituals or ceremonies, they may also involve other activities such as fasting, feasting, or spending time with family and community. Rituals are more formalized sequences of specific actions or ceremonies, and they're performed within the context of a religious or spiritual practice. So they may often be integral components of observances, but not all observances necessarily involve rituals, and they can encompass a wider range of practices beyond formalized rituals. Okay, so rituals can be part of observances. Observances tend to be have many different things going on within them, if that makes sense. And observance is just merely a ceremony or action to celebrate a holiday or other important event. And then most observances reflect religious, cultural, historical, or societal values. So observances, they serve to maintain religious or cultural traditions, and they can help deepen spiritual connections. But they also provide opportunities for communal worship, reflection, and celebration. They may involve rituals or other activities like prayer, reflection, fasting, feasting, community gatherings, or acts of service. And they may commemorate a specific day, event, or occasion. We already know that. They may be recurring daily, weekly, monthly, seasonally, yearly, etc. And they may be tied to specific calendar dates like holidays or festivals. So common themes of religious observance are found worldwide, and they reflect shared human experiences and societal needs, despite innate differences in practice and belief. And I just wanted to list a few common categories of religious observance, which can include festivals of light, which is a festivity that involves the symbolism of light triumphing over darkness. Harvest festivals, so observances that celebrate the gathering of crops or expressing gratitude for the earth's bounty. New Year's celebrations are pretty obvious. Days of atonement, repentance, so days of observance for introspection, repentance, and seeking forgiveness. The commemoration of people, so observances commemorating the lives and teachings of spiritual leaders or other individuals. And then days of remembrance and mourning, so observances remembering events or individuals and or mourning losses. So I wanted to cover this too because, it's always good to have a starting off point, but basically Christianity in the United States. So due to the popularity and prevalence of Christianity within the U.S., I began researching Christian observances and feast days. So approximately 65 to 75% of the U.S. population identifies with a religious affiliation or practices a religion in some form. And of this percentage of all religious practitioners, roughly 42 to 56% of those practitioners identify as Christian. So there are many Christian denominations. Probably the most prevalent is Protestant, and they make up roughly 29 to 37% of Christian practitioners, followed by Catholics, Catholicism, which is roughly 13 to about 19%. Evangelicalism is tied exactly with Catholicism. Then we have the non-denominational Christianity, which is between 8 and 9%. Historic black churches, which is about 5 to 5.5%. And Mormonism, which is roughly 1.3 to 1.5%. And then just to compare that to Christianity practiced in Carroll County, there's roughly 38.6% of the people in Carroll County are religious. So interestingly, that kind of coincides with the 42 to 56% of religious practitioners identifying as Christian, and the 38.6% of the people in Carroll County that consider themselves religious, they all fall within a Christian denomination. So, like, there's a 2.7% are Baptist, 9.3 Catholic, 2.2 Lutheran, 7.3 Methodist, 3.2 Pentecostal, 2.9 Presbyterian. And then, interestingly, the highest number is another Christian faith. So, and then it was also interesting to see that there's no Episcopalians, no Jewish practitioners, or practitioners of Eastern faiths or Islam. So, historically, European colonization brought Christianity to the New World continents, particularly by the English, the Spanish, and the French. The native peoples were quickly overtaken by European conquest, disease, conversion, oppression, and relocation, and their spiritual beliefs were discarded and mostly blotted out from U.S. history. Colonial settlements gave way to organized nationhood, and then freedom of religion became a protected right, solidified by the First Amendment of the Constitution under the Establishment or Free Exercise Clause, which basically just ensures that government cannot establish an official religion or discriminate against individuals based on their religious beliefs. It guarantees individuals the right to practice their religion freely without interference from the government. And so just to quote it, it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So basically, I was looking into any Christian observance that I could find that fell on the 13th and 14th of February. And for the 13th of February, there was no specific Christian feast day, but it can fall into the range of when Ash Wednesday takes place. So Ash Wednesday is a Christian observance of fasting, repentance, and reflection. But in 2017, Ash Wednesday fell on March 1st. So typically the day before Ash Wednesday marks the beginning of the Christian liturgical season of Lent. And Lent is just a period of 40 days, not counting Sundays, leading up to Easter Sunday, during which Christians traditionally engage in fasting, repentance, prayer, and other forms of self-denial. So Ash Wednesday is determined by Easter, and that's based on the lunar calendar. So Easter will fall on the first Sunday following the first full moon after the vernal or spring equinox. So the spring equinox varies by a day or two from year to year, but in 2017, it fell on March 20th. So Easter then fell on the 16th of April. And the date of Ash Wednesday fluctuates each year, but it typically falls between the 4th of February and the 10th of March. So the 14th of February, however, it's not considered a public holiday, but it is celebrated by the Anglican and Lutheran churches, and they tend to be the only Christian denominations which celebrate the feast of St. Valentine on the 14th of February. The Catholic Church did up until 1969, but the Catholic Church then removed him or them, because there's multiple, from the general Roman calendar of the feasts of the saints due to quote-unquote lack of reliable information about him, which is interesting. So many early Christian martyrs were named Valentine, and then they became conflated to celebrate one feast day, the 14th of February. And so it's often confusing the different stories about the Valentines. So I didn't want to go too deep into it, but basically know that there's at least three that I could identify. There's Saint Valentine of Rome, and he was martyred or killed in 269 CE. There's a Saint Valentine of Terni. It's formerly the city Interamna, and he died in 273 CE. And then supposedly a Saint Valentine of Africa. I didn't know what name to attribute to him, but it's mentioned in some early martyrologies of the Catholic Church that he was martyred in Africa with a number of companions. But that's pretty much all that's known about him. So Saint Valentine is considered to be the patron saint of lovers, beekeepers, and people with epilepsy, which was interesting. So the day became associated with romantic love around the 14th and 15th centuries, with English writers like Geoffrey Chaucer and John Gower attributing the date as a time when birds choose their mates. So lovebirds, pairing or mating. They also had connotations of the arrival of spring. And Valentine's Day customs developed in the 18th century England and spread throughout the English-speaking world in the 19th century. So in Italy, keys are given to lovers as a romantic symbol and an invitation to unlock the giver's heart, which was really, really cheesy. But whatever. In Slovenia, Saint Valentine was one of the saints of spring, and he was a saint of good health and the patron of beekeepers and pilgrims, which I thought was interesting because, as flowers start to bloom, the bees will become more active, and then also as the weather improves, pilgrims can go out and, make their pilgrimages. So St. Valentine does seem to kind of correlate with this ushering in of spring. So there is a proverb, I think it's Slovenian, that says that St. Valentine brings the keys of roots. So plants and flowers start to grow on this day. And it has been celebrated as the day when the first work in the vineyards and in the fields commences. So some antiquarian folk customs involved more connections to the spring season. There were a lot to go into, but basically it kind of gets carried over into the sending of greeting cards because, the weather is better, I guess, to send things out. And those greeting cards are now called Valentines or whatever. And then offering sweets and confectionery. Well, if the bees are more active, you're going to be getting more honey. And then presenting beautiful spring flowers. So once the flowers start blooming. And then all of these are kind of, they're tied to kind of the more commercial Valentine's Day in the U.S. So, but as far as Christian observances, those were really the only things that I could find associated with it. And the Ash Wednesday doesn't technically count because, it doesn't line up. At least in 2017, it doesn't line up. But I wanted to provide a lot of the sources that I used. I will have more sources in the next presentation simply because there's still a lot to go. But basically, probably the best book, it would be difficult, of the ones on this list. So I really liked Kenneth Dowden. His book, The European Paganism, or just European Paganism, The Realities of Cult from Antiquity to the Middle Ages, because it does show how much, pagan practice still is found in so many Western ritual, even to this day, even in Christianity. And, of course, I love Ronald Hutton. I love anything he does, because he's very thorough. He is very wordy in his description of things, but he's very well researched, and he always is writing kind of with a pagan bent in mind, which I find very fascinating. So let's see. Yeah, I love anything Claude Lecoteau does, but let's see, I think this was very helpful for the second half, the hidden history of elves and dwarves, and demons and spirits of the land, the ancestral lore and practices. So I like that. Okay, the Return of the Dead, that was kind of important. Oh, Nigel. I love Nigel Pennick, Pagan Book of Days, Guide to the Festivals, Traditions, and Sacred Days of the Year. Pretty much just kind of fun. A fun book. And let's see, what else do I have? Oh, okay. So I wanted to quickly go through, and if you guys are looking to find other information that's not necessarily occult related, there are some really great channels out there, and I provided a list here that will go over not only Delphi, but also like Carroll County and other related material that is very very well researched. Sometimes even getting like direct interviews from people. Even going over different elements of corruption, and sometimes narrowing in on a very specific niche of this whole investigation. But in particular, if you are looking for more of the court proceedings and explanations of judicial process, I recommend Defense Diaries, like all the time for everything. They're also a podcast. Bob and Ali Mata, they're a defense team, husband and wife, and they're Ali's still a practicing defense attorney, so they're both defense attorneys, and they really have a unique vantage point especially when it comes to this case. And then I really enjoy Criminality. I've been on her channel just to promote myself, but she's very thorough and she helps make things understandable when it comes to a lot of the breakdown of anything law related. And it's mostly, she does have great access to like Bob Mata, and there's another really fantastic guy that she has on a lot, Travis, and they do a pretty good job of breaking down what different things mean as far as law goes. But Criminality Teresa is also well versed in criminology and criminological studies. So I find those to be really great resources if you're looking to find specific stuff on court stuff, because I'm not going to attempt to cover it. It's a little out of my purview. But and then finally, I do want to recommend some YouTube channels for Norse mythology if you're interested in it. If you maybe want to check some of the research that I've done. These were a lot of the people that I looked at. Jackson Crawford, he's a doctor of linguistics. I mean, he knows Old Norse. And he does go over a lot of the mythology and a lot of the sources from where that mythology comes from. And then Norse Magic and Beliefs is a pretty good channel. It's just a guy talking about the different sources for how modern pagan practice then gets kind of interpreted. So it's taking historical sources and then showing how modern pagans are then applying those sources to produce their new practices. And then we have like Arith Harger. He's great. He's going to be more on like the meditative, metaphysical side, the spirituality side of Norse myth and practice. And same with Midgard Musings. Like he's a practitioner. He still does do pretty in-depth, but not like super long videos on different concepts found in Norse practice and belief. Kruckenford is going to be great for an overall kind of big picture view of Indo-European myth and how they kind of bleed into each other. They bleed into different cultures. And he's very thorough, very well researched. And then Ocean Keltoy and Wolf the Red, they've collaborated to do some really great podcasts together. And they kind of talk about like the contemporary modern heathen Norse Germanic pagan angle of, you know, what's going on now, some of the things that modern practitioners have to either deal with or overcome. And I do think they're good at describing like some of the different deities or concepts of like the Norse soul and stuff like that. So these guys are all great resources. I just wanted to come and share that, and let you know that the next presentation is going to be very pagan heavy. So stay tuned. I wanted to get this first part out mostly because like my voice box can only handle so much talking. But I very much appreciate any constructive critiques, any additional ideas or questions pertaining to the subject matter, and I really want to thank everybody who has come in here, has listened, has given me feedback. It's a really awesome thing that I am reaching people, you know. I'm not just talking to myself, and I'm making sense sometimes, I think. So this is great. So thank you for listening. I hope to be back real soon with the much more interesting second half, to be honest. So until then, you guys take care of yourselves and have a good day. Have a good week. I'll see you soon.